Sorry, I forgot. Before we start, I'll say that hopefully I can chair the whole of this meeting, but if I start feeling tired, I'm going to pass over to Councillor Malik. So fingers crossed I can manage. Right. This meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. Any exempt private items on the agenda, the live stream will cease prior to the meeting moving into private. There might be a short delay. A recording of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Do we say the attendees but wearing masks? No. Right. Would members and officers please remember to switch microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone? Unfortunately, I can't do that because I can't reach it. And switch microphones off when finished. Reporting officers joining using Teams, use the hands up icon on your screen for questions and comments. Please turn your camera and microphone on when speaking and off when finished. Also, can you please ensure that all your mobile phones are switched off or placed onto silent mode? Right, we will now start the meeting. Apologies.
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Agley.
Minutes, the 11th of April. Are they correct? Thank you. Thank you. The 20th of June, are they correct?
Yes, Chair. Actually, I chaired this meeting, but it's not been mentioned in these minutes, and also asked many questions and make comments, but nothing has been mentioned in this, these minutes. So, ask Angela to comment this.
Subject to that, you agreed.
Subject to that, do we all agree with the minutes? Thank you. Chair's update. Item 14, the stage outline business case and delivery model, has been withdrawn from the agenda. Due to the complexities of the item, a training briefing for FRG members has been arranged with an external consultant on the 22nd of August, prior to the additional meeting of Scrutiny FRG arranged for the 24th of August. Comments and recommendation to be made to the executive meeting on 12th of September. Any disclosure of interests? No. Urgent business?
None, Chair.
References from committees and other bodies?
None, Chair.
Now we'll start on the first item is annual health and safety work plan. Liz?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So the purpose of the health and safety work plan is to inform elected members as to how the council will meet service delivery requirements with regards to health and safety statutory inspection and enforcement within those businesses in Luton. Just for members' information, it is a statutory service that we deliver, health and safety inspection and enforcement, and that responsibility is split between ourselves in the local authority and the health and safety executive, depending on the type of business. Nationally, there's a work plan that's produced annually in the form of a HELA-LAC, and this version is 67.2 revision 11. So our work plan for this next year has been based on that HELA-LAC. It is primarily project-led interventions. Quite a while ago, there was a whole review of health and safety inspection enforcement delivery, and government decided to reduce the burdens on business. There'd be no inspection without a reason. So therefore, many of the project-led interventions, we do still investigate notifiable accidents and also follow up service requests as well. If members have any comments or questions about the work plan that we propose for this next year, happy to take those.
Yeah, before I open it up to questions, can I ask, the inflatable amusement devices, is that mandatory to inform you that they're actually going to be, that they've actually, you know, that they're being used where they actually are using the inflatable amusement devices?
So those obviously relate to typically bouncy castles,
Yes.
those sorts of things. And through a separate sort of route, we're often notified of where those inflatables are going to be within the borough. And that's typically through the council safety advisory group. So event holders are invited to attend the safety advisory group, talk through their event. And obviously one of the key questions is whether there are going to be inflatables there. And then the appropriate advice is given. Some of the events actually happen on council lands, such as parks, and obviously the corporate side of health and safety, which is separate to this, would do their due diligence and seek clarification and confirmation that the event organiser has got the necessary paperwork and documentation in place and insurances, particularly with regards to tethering down of the inflatables, because as we've known nationally, there have been unfortunate incidents where they've not been tethered down properly.
Yeah, that was why my question was, is it mandatory?
It's not mandatory to notify us, no, but health and safety is always the responsibility of the operator.
I know it is, but
we obviously would advise and guide.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, hi. I'm looking at page 36, paragraph 2.4 under your enforcement policy. In the middle there, it talks about REPA authorisations for covert surveillance. Have any applications been made, please?
No, there hasn't been a need to do any RIPA authorisations for health and safety investigations, but obviously if we needed to, then we would. It's not something that would be common, but we put it in there anyway, because within the body of the work plan there is guidance from the health and safety as to what sort of content should be within this report, and part of that is to make reference to the enforcement policy and RIPA. So it's just making it open and transparent that if we needed to, we could use that power that's available to us.
Okay, so no applications rather than authorisations.
No, we've not needed to do that for health and safety, but obviously if we did, then we would if we felt it was relevant.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Wynne.
Yes, just a couple of clarifications. I point you to page 29, up near the top in 8, 9 and 9 and 10, really. This, I thought the first paragraph was just a set of weasel words, to be honest. But the main essence of 8, 9, 10 and 11 seems to be that you're understaffed. Is that a fair interpretation of the report?
We are, to be fair, a leanly resourced team, and obviously within the cover of this report, we've said that this year we will look closely at that to future-proof the service delivery. Within the team, it's not just health and safety that we deliver, we also deliver food safety, food standards work as well, feed, and such is that we can flex our resource. So if there was something pressing or urgent, for example, on health and safety, then we would divert resource to focus on that. So the type of officer that we have within the team are able to be flexible, but it's just bringing to members' attention that's how we intend to deliver our service this next year.
Okay, the reason I said I didn't quite understand was that a phraseology like a proportion of the 2 vacancies would be assigned didn't really tell me very much, to be honest. Anyway, if I go forward, Yes. Bottom of page 33, this is a report about health and safety. It seems to be talking there primarily about building a more inclusive economy. I didn't quite see why it was in the report.
Within the report, it is good practice to make reference to the corporate objectives of the council. So within here, we've put the strategic priorities. It's not always possible to link the whole service delivery to every single strategic priority, because some we might not just be able to, show how our work contributes to those. But generally, health and safety is about keeping people safe in the workplace. Obviously, by having safe workplaces, it secures and builds upon strong local economic delivery. Obviously, lost days through accidents or ill health due to poor workplace accidents or incidents can impact on local economic delivery. So we've just tried to show how our service meets, wherever possible, the strategic priorities.
So Frank's on the applications. Yeah, I was intrigued by the comment on the appendices to item 7. That's on page 46. I was just really looking for a bit more detail about it. Huge numbers, obviously, of deliveries from takeaway premises these days. And in fact, they were queuing up to get into McDonald's as I walked down the main street tonight, all the delivery drivers. Has that really improved the health and safety situation with restaurants?
In terms of the HELA-LAC and what the national priority is around delivery drivers, is there have been incidences where, and it's not just takeaway delivery drivers, it's people that are driving lorries, delivery trucks. Obviously they're out and about on the road all day. They call into premises, warehouses, and they may need to use bathroom facilities. And there have been cases where the workplace that they're delivering from or delivering to hasn't made available the use of the facilities. So nationally, there is a campaign to encourage all workplaces to enable delivery drivers to make best use of the facilities. So because we're out routinely in food businesses doing inspections, it's something that we can raise with the food business operators, not just ensuring that they've got facilities available for their staff, but to also think about those delivery drivers, because there have been cases nationally where delivery drivers have, had to go to toilets in all sorts of places, which isn't great. So it's just trying to overcome that sort of antisocial element from happening. So
It's opposite my back gate.
yeah.
But no, that's fine. Thank you very much. That was all I have.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Officer, for the report. The Appendix 1, I was also expecting to find an additional column, unless I've misread it, the actual appendix itself, on basically milestones achieved or timescales as to when you'll achieve these by, unless you all work progress, because I'm pretty certain that there are, reading through the appendix, there are certain a number of items on here that you've actually are actively working on to meet and so on. So I think that would have been perhaps useful as to if it's work in progress, is this a new objective, and in terms of milestones, to keep track of when you've achieved them, when you'll review and so on.
Oh, that's a valid point, and we obviously this needs to go to executive next, so we can add that in just to show.
Hussain.
It's a comment plus in terms of the in light of the COVID-19. My first comment really is that in light of that, you've got shortage of 2 vacancies in the team. I was very pleased to see only the other day that the hygiene inspectors were in my local grocery shop doing a very thorough checks, and I stood there for about 20 minutes, and I was very pleased that they were very thorough doing that, because it is more now than ever because of the virus that we do have, these places inspected thoroughly rather than just a very quick visit. So when do you expect that we would have, in terms of the staffing to be, in enough to be able to do your statutory duties?
Yes, well, we are currently advertising at the moment. We have had a recruitment drive this year and taken on 3 new officers, and they've obviously hit the ground running and are doing a really good job. So now they're settled, it's now time to get 2 more officers in. Unfortunately, nationally, there is a shortage of experienced officers, and it would be nice to be able to attract experienced officers, but we'll just have to see who applies, and if necessary, train them up. So yeah, but if they have a good qualification such as the degree in environmental health, that's a good start. It's a good basis, and as I was saying earlier, it enables us to be more flexible because they can turn their hand not just to health and safety but also food safety and food standards as well, so we can flex with demand.
The recommendation is that the Open Review and Scrutiny Board is asked to note the contents. Thank you very much, Liz, for this report. The next one is yours again. The Food Standards and Feed Law Service Plan. Now, I'm going to do Chair's. I've got a question about figures on page 62 and page 65. There seems to be, what's the difference between the two? Because the first A and B tie up, but then the rest doesn't tie up with.
Right, so on page 62, 3.2, this is a complete list of all of the premises that we have registered with us, and their category of risk rating and how frequently they need to be inspected. So that's all of them.
Yeah.
But obviously we don't need to inspect every single business that we've got registered in 1 year. So the table on page 65 is actually what this year, from April the 1st to March next year, needs inspecting, because all businesses are on different inspection frequencies.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Frank.
Okay, we're now on food service, yeah? Yeah, a couple of questions. First of all, in paragraph 8, you talk about new complex food businesses, challenging enforcement, national and international implications. I mean, I guess some of that is to do with import and export at the airport and what have you, but just a bit more information would be helpful, please.
So with regards to the airport, it's not actually classed as an official food port. So we don't have the same level of food activity up there as, for example, Heathrow would. Obviously, that's a business decision for the airport to decide whether they want to become a food port, and then we'd have to have a whole function just serving that. In terms of the complexity, it's particularly more, I would say, rather than the food hygiene side, although we do have a lot of enforcement issues on food hygiene, it's more on the food standards side. Food standards is another statutory service, and it's centred around the quality of food, description of food, the content of food, allergens and fraud. And as you can imagine, when you're dealing with food fraud, there's quite a lot of investigation to be done on that, and potentially it can actually have national implications, particularly if you've got businesses operating in our area that supply food on a national basis or import food on a national basis. So we have, we do have cases that can take a lot of time to gather the evidence, etc., and find out what's going on and to investigate. And also what we've seen over the past few years is an increase in the number of EU approved premises. So typically most of our food profile is made up of takeaways, schools, that type of premises, but we are seeing more manufacturers open. So as you can imagine, we've got food factories that are making and manufacturing food, and structurally they've got to be sound. There's got to be sound procedures in place, microbiological testing. And again, those businesses are more likely to distribute on a national basis. So there's more implications if something goes wrong. And also on top of that, those sorts of businesses, particularly if they're manufacturing meals, for example, which have got meat in, need to have EU approval status. So there's a whole application process to go through. And obviously, that factory needs to meet certain standards. So it's requiring a lot more specialist officer knowledge and inspection approach. And obviously, if something went wrong, then the right level of enforcement action. But on a day-to-day business, we are dealing with, poor performers, closures for pests, continual poor compliance. So you need, time and experience to effectively deal with those scenarios and situations to make sure that the public are kept safe.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Could I move on then to page 62? 181 unrated premises, newly registered, not yet operating, or require first inspection. Well, obviously, if they're not yet operating, they're not aware. No one's going to pick up any problems from them. But a bit concerned about requiring first inspection. So, of these food businesses that are operating and are trading and have never been inspected?
Obviously, we've had the pandemic, that's been and gone now, thankfully, touch wood. We did see a big increase in the number of food businesses registering with us, particularly home caterers. And the team have done a really hard job of contacting those businesses. Sometimes businesses register and they don't actually start immediately. So we have got some premises that, we're in regular contact with to see when they're planning on actually starting to operate and offering them advice in the meantime. I would say this table here is a snapshot in time. So we don't have 181 registered now. The team have worked hard to go through the unrated list and close off those businesses that have decided actually they're not going to go ahead. But yes, we do have a backlog. I must say though, throughout the pandemic, unlike a lot of authorities, we continued with our inspection programme. Obviously, the Food Standards Agency did come out with a recovery plan where they recognised that due to COVID impact, and because obviously that statutory work fell to our team as well, that it meant that the food inspection could actually essentially decline if need be. But we were lucky here at Luton because we had the COVID marshals and public health did a lot of the contact tracing, whereas colleagues in other authorities, they had a lot of contact tracing duties to do as well. So that enabled us to keep on with our inspection programme. So for the routine inspection programmes, we're in a healthy position for the food hygiene side. And obviously it is the unrated that we just need to do some further work on. But we've introduced a new scheme system now on the computer where we try and contact the business that's registered by phone. If they don't pick up, we send a message and also send a letter. And if we don't hear back from them after that, then we assume that they're not going ahead, and they know that they're going to be closed on the system. So administratively, that's really helped with the unrated list, because it can become unwieldy. And this is a national issue that's been replicated throughout the country. And the Food Standards Agency as well, they're coming up with a revised strategy with regards to food hygiene, inspection, enforcement and registration as well, which should help. And also look at whether or not there's different approaches, because within our unrated numbers, we do have quite a lot of low risk businesses. And obviously what the Food Standards Agency is recognising now is that efforts should really be prioritised towards higher risk businesses. So it may be that rather than having to do a physical inspection of, say, an example, a cake maker, which takes up quite a long time, so you've got to make an appointment, go to them, do the visit, log it, etc. It may be that there'll be a different approach for that, and then that will free up more time for higher risk. So I just want to assure you we are working hard on that unrated for the food hygiene.
Yeah, thank you. If I can just follow that, there are a couple of issues arise partly from your answer. I'm a bit, I suppose, concerned is probably the word, to hear that you're making appointments to go and visit food premises. I would have thought an unannounced visit was likely to be more effective than making an appointment. But the other thing is, it would be good to understand what priority is given to newly registered premises that are trading, and how long can we expect a newly registered premise to carry on trading before it's inspected, and does the same regime apply to long-standing registered premises where there's been a management change? Because I would put that in the same risk category myself.
Okay, so with regards to unannounced, the question you raised there, most of our businesses are inspected unannounced, including newly registered. The ones where we have to make an appointment are where they're operating from a home environment, and they're typically cake makers. But we are getting more caterers now that are delivering through platforms, setting up at home. But unfortunately, because it's a house, we can't just knock on the door and walk in. We do actually have to make an appointment, but that's only for home caterers. So all of our other inspections are visited unannounced. In terms of priority, we do look at the unrated list and who's registering, and obviously you can tell from the trading name and also from the registration form what sort of business they are. So we are guided to prioritise higher risk businesses, typically takeaways, that type of thing. So those will get a priority visit over, for example, a cake maker at home because of the risk element. By law, businesses need to register at least 28 days before they start. Not all of them do, not all of them know that, particularly if they're an independent business. If they're a chain, they've got the backing of head office, and head office knows the rules. So sometimes we do, get a good space of time in order to engage and then prioritise an inspection. And the other thing that's had a positive impact is the platforms. So if someone wants to trade on Just Eat or Uber or one of those platforms, they're very keen to get the hygiene rating. So, once a business is registered, they will often contact us and, say we've registered, we're going to be inspected soon. Obviously, we don't tell them when, but we do inform them that it'll be very soon. But again, we're not in these businesses day in, day out. We've got 1,800 something premises. Ultimately, food safety is the responsibility of that operator. We do offer advice, obviously, when they register, tell them to get ready for inspection, and we offer advice when we visit them as well. And if needs be, depending on what the outcome of their inspection is, they may then be subject to a revisit, because obviously we want to see that increase to compliance and for them to work on things that need sorting out.
Sorry, just one more question. how often, or does it ever, does someone planning to open a new food premise actually come to you for advice before they start?
We do get it. It's not very common, to be honest, but now we've signed up to the electronic online registration system, so people apply online, they get an automated email back and it tells them what they need to do to get ready for inspection. And also this new system that we've introduced where we have all of the unrated premises and they're dished out across the team to officers to make initial contact, say hello, we see you've registered, when are you planning on opening, get ready for your first inspection. Then there's a lot of advice given there, and often businesses want to ask questions because, again, at the back of their mind now, they're wanting to get that 5. So that's very encouraging. Yeah, so they're keen to get that good hygiene rating because they know publicly now, because it's online, and also if they don't get a good rating, they won't be allowed to trade on the platform. That in itself has helped our job and makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, can I ask you, it's not in the report, but in terms of some of the businesses, particularly in food, were, sort of quite often get prosecuted, get a very heavy fine. How often do we ask for a maximum penalty in terms of that they shouldn't be operating in the food business in the future?
When we take a prosecution, we obviously have to look at previous history, any mitigation, etc. So we do look carefully at how long has that food business operator been operating that business? What has the past history been like? You know, has it been consistently bad? And all of that will be considered by our legal team. There have been cases where things have been so serious or have been continued, poor compliance, that we have recommended that food business operator is prohibited from operating a food business, and that has actually happened. And in the report, you'll see in 21-22, we did actually prohibit one food business operator. So it's not a common thing. Prosecution isn't a common thing. Closures are for pests, and then obviously depending on the reasons for the pests issue, then that might then result in a prosecution, or it might in the first instance result in a simple caution, which is a marker against that premises. And then if it doesn't turn itself around and it finds itself in that same or similar situation, then it would be a prosecution, and then potentially it could then go through to prohibition of a food business operator. But often we find soon after taking enforcement action, where you've got food business operators that aren't that serious about their food business, they soon go and the business changes hands, and then we're starting again.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm asking you, and without naming the particular business, I've seen them in the last 10 years, too many times they have been closed, and they still continue to operate from the same premises. And it really concerned me seriously that all the breaches, from what I read in the newspaper, were very serious indeed. And I would have thought that they should have been serious penalties, that they should not be operating in the food business in the future. You know, if it is persistent person, it's like a driving ban, but if somebody doing it, over and over again, then I think the action needs to be taken very seriously.
Well, obviously, I don't know which food business operators being alluded to. It would be useful to know. Yes, but it may, on the face of it, possibly look as though it's the same business, but actually the ownership has changed. And this is the difficulty. Sometimes, there are games that are played. People will suddenly become the new owner and register in their name, but actually there might be someone in the shadows, really, who is the food business operator. So that's maybe what you're seeing. You're seeing the same people there, but actually on paper and legally, it's a different food business operator. I don't know, but you'll have to tell me later who the premises is.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm saying that in the licensing committee, it comes very often, those of us that sit on the licensing, but we seem to have found the answer where it is another member of the family, the name used, and we don't issue them a license. So I'm sure that can be, a bit more effort could be put in so that those people not operate from the same premises and the same people, if they are for often, doing that. Yeah, thank you.
Got to switch my. Thank you very much, Liz, for your 2 reports.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Councillor Malik, I forgot. Sorry, Liz. Councillor Malik actually wanted to ask a question and I forgot.
It's all right, Chair. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Liz, for your comprehensive report. Just a couple of quick questions. I know you have been explaining this from last 10-20 minutes. More complex food businesses are opening up in Luton. Complex businesses, obviously due to decline in hygiene standard. We have to look into this, what is happening and why this is happening, because the whole pressure is going to go on health services, our community, our children. Do we have any control on this? That's my first question. And the second one is, there are lots of schools, primary schools, and we have takeaways, restaurants next to them. And, according to national policy or local policy, I think we should not let them open takeaways or restaurants next to schools. Even, these are primary schools. Obviously, they're not good for our children's health. So, in Choney, Danside Primary, we've got 4, 5, 6 restaurants and takeaways just within 500 radius. So, in future, would we be able to control this? So, again, the same question about, obviously, it's putting pressure on us, on NHS, and not good for our community.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have in environmental health through the food registration process any control over, what type of business applies. If it's a food business, it has to register by law, and then it's subject to inspection enforcement, irrespective of what type it is or where it is. Obviously, I can't comment really on takeaways, etc., being near schools. From my point of view, that's something for planning enforcement, potentially in public health. And I know that there is work on that, but I'm not the best person to give you the finer detail on that. In terms of the standards of businesses dropping, again, this has been noticed nationally. I think that, it's the after effects really of the pandemic. People have decided not to work in hospitality anymore. It's hard to recruit staff. Obviously, some businesses are struggling financially. Now we've got the added complexity of fuel costs rising. And as we move into the winter, people may have less disposable income, so they might not be eating out so much. So there's a lot of factors that are coming together, which may then impact on structural repairs, less time spent on cleaning because staff hours are being cut, or there's just not the staff available. But, we've got a good handle on our food businesses in Luton, and obviously we've been carrying on inspecting them throughout the pandemic. So we've got our finger on the pulse really as to what's what out there, and if they come out less than a 3, then on the hygiene rating they will be subject to a revisit. And we work with businesses, and we find locally businesses are grateful for our interventions and generally do listen to us and take good action. So we have positive working relationships, but there are risks, and And again, you know, it is ultimately the food business's responsibility to make sure they're operating in a safe manner. But where they're not, then we'll take the appropriate action.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought maybe it would be helpful if I just responded on the issue around opening hours and takeaways near schools. There is some work going on at the moment. It's an issue that members have raised with us, concerned about takeaways near schools. We are working with public health. What we found, and we're monitoring the situation, what we found over the last 3 or 4 years is that applications have dwindled for new takeaways. That's not to say that takeaways don't appear where there's an existing use, where they won't need planning permission because it's an existing use. We have had applications that have been approved, conditions, and we can put conditions on the opening hours, which we have done in respect of, I think, 1 or 2 applications that we've had. So I just wanted to sort of reassure that it's an area that we're exploring in a lot more detail. We need to do a bit more work for when we start to review the local plan, because we'll be looking at a policy to try and strengthen our position. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9. Sue, you're going to present this? Yeah. Sue, you could stay where you are if you want. Yeah. As long as you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wasn't sure if you'd like me to sit there because the camera moves around, but if that's okay, thank you. So I'm presenting the draft roadmap report tonight. I do have Kat Wisoka online virtually, who's been heavily involved in its production. And if there are questions that I'm unable to answer, then I may sort of defer to Kat, if that's okay, just because some of there's quite a lot of technical information. So I think Councillor.
So much, Chair. Obviously, I'm going to be super cautious, but I shall nevertheless mention it anyway. Is that I do have an interest in this because obviously the report also mentions Luton Rising sustainability strategy, and I'm a director of LAB of Luton Rising.
Well, same here then.
Yeah, I'm just going to mention it anyway. So I'd like it to be noted, please.
Okay, thank you. So we started work on this and using a consultant called Ether back in December 21, and it's been through quite a lengthy process of sort of evidence gathering, which is set out in the report. So I think you'll see on page 2 of the report, so you can see a process map there. So we've compiled what we needed to do was update the baseline data, which was compiled by another consultant a few years ago. So we've looked at that, and then there's been various workshops which have taken place as well to compile various activities, if you like, to work out what the best way forward would be in terms of trying to identify a pathway or roadmap to achieve our net zero ambition to 2040. And we've got to the point now where we would like to sort of bring it forward for consultation. So this document is basically going to be a consultation document. And we tried to do it in a sort of visually attractive way so that general public, find it a bit more engaging perhaps than a sort of dry document full of statistics. So we intend to take it out to consultation. That's the plan. It's down for executive in September, and you'll see this recommendation here. So that it does, at the moment, it comprises of about 3 areas, which are the roadmap itself, which is a 1-page. So we've put, what the consultants have done is an illustrative 1-page diagram of the sort of stages in which we'd need to go through to get to net zero by 2040, very diagrammatic. Then there's a report that sort of backs that up. And then there will be, and we don't have it unfortunately here this evening, a more detailed roadmap action plan, which is currently in development. And the reason why we don't have it is because we need to look at some more information about carbon savings and costings around some of that as well. So it is a fairly high level document, but it does sort of set the foundations for the way forward. And for the next 5 years, you'll see it's about sort of planning, it's about strategies, it's about putting all of that in place, because we know the government are also looking at this, and we need sort of policy at the national level really to make a big difference. And then the kind of scaling up is the transition process. So by the late 20s, we'll hope that there are policies in place at a more national level, but we ourselves will have been introducing new policies as well to try and deal with some of the issues. And we expect by the sort of 2030s onwards that we'll be into widespread implementation. And as I said, that sort of Appendix 1 sets out a sort of graphic image of how we're looking to achieve that in very broad terms. It is important to note that all these actions and recommendations have not been calculated in terms of cost yet and deliverability, so they're all subject to funding, and that's where we're doing more work, but it will be quite high level at this stage. And I think it's also important to make the point that this isn't just about the council taking action, this is about the whole town taking action. So you'll see in this document that we identify a range of partners that we would want to work with. We're looking at setting up partnerships with businesses, private sector, to try and, so we take the lead, but we're trying to encourage other people to also scale up their work towards net zero. So I think for tonight, the key thing was to share with you the objectives, the key actions, and the main sectors that need carbon reduction. And they are broken down in the report. So you'll see that the main sort of list of priority objectives are split into a number of areas, which includes homes, non-residential buildings, transport and active travel, Luton Airport, waste and consumer choices, and biodiversity and resilience. And they're the kind of key areas that we feel that we should be looking at going forward. So I think I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay, and I'll take questions.
Yes, thank you. I thought the report was very useful. The one comment that you made that really worries me is the fact that we haven't got round to actually costing this and allocating budgets and stuff. Because if we go out and we start in any way consulting or exposing this to a wider audience, if we haven't got to the point where at least we've got outline funding, we potentially could look very silly if subsequently the funding isn't available. So I welcome the report. I think it does come across as being fairly easy to read, which was really good. There's only one other bit other than the funding, which I think is fundamental. There's only one other bit that immediately leaped out at me, and that was on page 97. where at the bottom we're quoting a best practice example, and the best practice example that's been picked was Luton has a comprehensive bus service improvement plan. The last time I saw anything about buses, they were trying to cut the buses and stop them running altogether. So I think it's a very poor example. The general public will see that and say, oh, improving bus services. No, you're not. But otherwise, as a general statement, yes, liked it, like the simplicity, like the presentation. It needs to be funded, and we need to get rid of contentious examples like that one.
Yes, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you for those comments. I think just to come back, yeah, on the funding side of things, I think that's a very valid point. I think the issue we've got is that we know that funding for these things quite often comes through grants and that kind of support, and so you know we are quite dependent on external grants and funding, which we recognise, and perhaps we need to bring that out a little bit more, make sure that when we do go out to consultation, and thank you for your comments, that we make it really clear that there's more work to do around this, and that these various suggestions that we're coming out with are not necessarily a given, and that, you know, it's not just about the council either, it's about partners implementing some of these as well. Just on the second point about the bus service improvement plan, I understand we have got funding. We don't yet have the money, I don't think, but we have got funding for bus service improvement plan, which was, I can't recall when it was brought to committee. I've got Sean behind me. I don't know whether he... Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just say, Sean, as far as I'm concerned, if I just take my immediate area where I live, the last time I heard about it, most of the buses going past the back of me are going to stop.
Sorry.
My understanding was the money we've got is for improving the infrastructure around buses, not buses. So it's all about signage and information and all that sort of thing. Nothing about increased funding to actually help the services run.
I think that's correct, Councillor Chapman. I think it does say in the example that this is about enabling infrastructure, looking at bus lanes and bus priority measures, those kinds of things. But yes, it doesn't support the actual services themselves. We're not allowed to do that because they're commercially operated.
But it might...
Sag is that if people look at that and they think, oh, better bus lanes with no buses.
No, point well made. We will look at another example. Thank you.
Either that or explain it's for infrastructure, not bus services. Oh, sorry. Yes,
Can I just say, Chair, that all members are concerned about the bus services and even the cuts to that. And I can say the number of us, about 5 or 6 of us, are even at a meeting the other night, is to how do we go around and what the local authority, because one of the things that members do now, local authorities are not allowed to operate a bus services. But there are local authorities that have found an alternatives to do that. And Andy Burnham is just one in Greater Manchester, a case in High Court, which is that they are going to do that. And number of routes that was not very profitable. Some of the Greater London, Greater Manchester local authorities are going to start services run by somebody else, not owning them, but somebody for non-profit organization. So I think it is something that you know, in the next few months we may have some sort of, we look at all the alternative, what everybody else is doing up and down the country, And I think it's very vital, particularly in the areas where there would be a major impact on the most vulnerable people.
I thank you for that. Yes, I entirely agree with what you said, and thank you for the input. My concern, and the reason I raised it, is that a report of this type, if it goes out to the general public and they pick out one item, like the one I've just picked out, there may be others for all I know, it's the one that jumped out at me. If they pick out an item like this, which they then say, don't believe it, and as you've just heard the input from Councillor Chapman, where it is seemingly the case that we get better infrastructure but no buses, then the general public will then dismiss the rest of the report because this one example is patently not true to them, and they'll just throw the whole lot straight in the bin. Sorry, but that's the way it works.
Thank you. Any other questions? Before I do the recommendations, Sue, you mentioned homes, and in the recommendation it says reduction objectives are listed in paragraphs 15 to 20. I believe that should be 14 to include homes. Can I amend that?
Yes, please, Chair. Yes, that is correct. It should be 14 to 20.
Right. Right, the recommendation is that Overview and Scrutiny Board is recommended to support Luton Council's commitment to a set of carbon reduction objectives as listed in paragraphs 14 to 20 and the release of the draft roadmap for wider consultation. Does everybody agree?
But until some of these other issues have been addressed, I think releasing it for more public attention would be dangerous.
Does everybody agree with that part? Put proviso in until we see what the funding will be and that the bus. David, you're normally far better at wording than I am. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that in terms of, informing the public in terms of the funding and what it can be used, not for, expectation from public that this is going to improve the bus services. It probably wouldn't, because if we can't use it for that purpose.
And the other things that are in here.
Yeah, so I think information, giving public the information is very important. I don't disagree with that. Why not? Yeah. We would be telling them.
Can I just make sure that nobody misinterprets what I'm saying? I'm entirely in support of our drive to get down to meeting our carbon objectives. So I'm not trying to decry it. I'm not trying to decry the process. I'm just saying, please be careful before you go to a wider audience that we don't actually damage our own cause.
Yes, Sue.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what we'll do is look to possibly amend the example or the wording just to pick up on the point made, which is a fair point. We'll also be, as I said, before we go out to consultation, we'll also be, we will have done a bit more work on the action plan, which we can, just trying to think how we do that. We can share with members, particularly at Climate Change Advisory Board, if we have a meeting prior to that, all the members of the Climate Change Advisory Board. I think also what I'd say is that we will make sure that we are caveating things quite strongly, in the sense, and also asking the right questions so that it doesn't lead the public to raise their expectations. And I understand the point being made there. So yes, there is a bit more work to do. And I think we'll have a think whether we bring it back. The other option, of course, would be to bring it back to the group during the consultation, to bring it back to the board during the consultation, and for the board to then have further input into the consultation process. But I'll be led by you, Chair.
Is that satisfied? Everybody's satisfied with that proviso that we can in fact say release the draft roadmap, provide a consultation with the proviso of what Sue has just said that she will do.
Makes sense to me.
Sorry?
I said it makes sense to me. Perfect sense. Do it that way.
Yeah. Thank you, Sue, for a very interesting report. Right. Oh, I've lost my page. Next item is item 10, Article 4, Direction, Commercial, Business and Service Uses to Residential Conversions, Luton Town Centre and surrounds. Sue, this is your report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's for me again to just present the report, but I've also got other colleagues. Sonny is online, and Planning Officer Yvonne, who wrote the report as well, because she was involved in looking at all the areas. So I'll carry on and present it, and then if there are questions, of course, I might pass over to them. Okay, so this report is regarding an Article 4 direction in relation to commercial, business and service uses to residential conversions. So it's to respond to legislative changes, and it's effectively bringing in a new Article 4 direction at Luton Town Centre and the surrounding area, which will replace the Article 4 direction, which actually did expire on the 31st of July this year. So the legislation that has changed means that light industrial and retail areas are now also subject to permitted development rights, which allow residential development to take place without going through the normal planning application process. So what we're doing is bringing in an Article 4 direction which effectively will mean that it doesn't stop development, but what it does do is require that development goes through the normal planning system and they have to apply for planning permission. So, for example, if somebody had a light industrial unit and wanted to convert it at the moment, there is a bit of a gap because they could put in to convert it through what we call a prior approval process, which is a very light touch intervention by planning, whereas normally you'd require full planning permission without the current changes that have just been brought in. So obviously these sites are really important to us from an economic development perspective, and we want to protect them from unmanaged changes of use and conversions to residential development. We've already seen that with the Office to Residential Development conversions that did take place prior to the Article 4 direction coming in. But as I said, the legislation is now actually given more flexibility, and therefore that's why we're looking to bring in this new Article 4 direction. So there's 7 locations proposed in and around the town centre. Land at Kingsway, and these are all, by the way, these are all areas that were previously covered by the former direction. So land at Kingsway, land northwest of Osborne Road, land at the junction of Putteridge Road and Hitchin Road, the Premier Business Park, Dencora Way, and then sort of grouped together Luton Town Centre and surrounds, land at Percival Way, Prince Way and President Way, and land to the north of the junction between Wigmore Lane and Eaton Green Road. And you'll see in your pack that there are plans showing the outline of all those areas that would be covered by the Article 4 direction. And I think won't go into detail now, but obviously if members have questions, the only other thing I should say as well is that we are recommending a non-immediate Article 4 direction. And the reason for that, there are 2 options. We can bring it in immediately, but that brings with it a significant risk of compensation payments, which we would obviously want to avoid. And I think that the lesser risk is actually giving the 12-month non-immediate direction and putting that in place so that we consult on it, we go out to consultation, that gives everybody, we look at the feedback then, and then we eventually bring it in at the end of the 12-month period. That means that people can't claim compensation, and it could be a significant amount, and we've got some legal advice around that. So that's what we're recommending. So over to you, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Franks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any need for debate about the principle of this. I'm sure we're all 100% supportive of the move. My only concern is that we've evidence in the past of some ministers being a wee bit hesitant, sometimes even refusing to confirm Article 4 directions where the local authority is trying to take too big a bite in one go. So I guess this is a plea for caution. I'm not trying to slow the process down. In fact, I think we all agree we'd rather like to speed it up. But what we don't want is for the council to go to the government with a proposal which is turned down because someone judges that the council's trying to apply it to too large an area in one go.
Yes, I think what you said, Councillor Franks, is correct in that the government do require strong evidence to support any Article 4 direction coming forward. And we do have to refer this to the Secretary of State, who can then decide to stop us from implementing it. However, I would say that the reason it's taken quite a long time to get to this stage is that we've done a thorough evidence base around this. We've looked at it, we've got the supporting information that we need, and we feel confident that we are in a position to go forward with this now with the information that we have, and it is quite strong evidence. So I think, you know, obviously there is a risk that the government could do that, but that's the case, you know, even if we were to sort of slow it down and try and do more. I don't think there's a great deal more we can do in terms of the evidence base. The 12-month non-immediate effect route does give us a bit more, it's less risky. And so I think with the evidence that we'll have via the consultation, that will also help when we do finally submit it to the Secretary of State to bring it in or to put it in place.
Thank you, Sue. Any other questions?
Questions, to be honest, Chair. I just wanted to, you know me and my being very nitpicky. On page 145, you've got two typos, Sundon Park and Biscot Road. But the answer to that is I entirely agree with what Councillor Frank says. Totally supportive, and if you could get away with doing it tomorrow, I'd be very happy. Thank you.
Thanks. But the recommendation is that OSB supports the recommendation to make a non-immediate Article 4 direction. And I'm not going to read out the locations. I'm going to say paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. Does everybody agree?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item is 11, the protection of Luton parks and green spaces, calculating a social value score for Luton's parks and green spaces.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just take you through the background of this report. It's a follow-up report from a previous report about the protection of the parks and green spaces that came to Overview and Scrutiny Board in November 2021. Resulting from that committee, a recommendation was sent to executive with regards to developing a social value toolkit to value all of the parks and open spaces. Taking that on board, executive approved that, and therefore we've been working with our colleagues in Business Intelligence Unit to develop a social toolkit to do that very purpose. I'm not going to take you through the actual process for doing that. I'm going to leave that to Business Intelligence colleagues of how they've actually come up with that scoring mechanism. But it would be the intention that if it's accepted that we use this social value score for each site, that we would then prioritise the protection of the parks by the hierarchy that they have in the local plan. So we would start with the highest social value score for the council's district parks, and when they was all covered by the dedication, we'd move down to neighbourhood parks, and then finally deal with the local parks, the local open spaces. I'm going to leave it there and ask any questions. And I say Eddie's here to talk about the specifics of how we come up with that social value tool.
I've got one question. I notice on the actual list, the small amenity green space, we've got are there any more other than what's on? It says etc.
Yes, yes, Chair. That they're just examples of what type of local of space is deemed a district park, a neighbourhood park, and a local open space. That's not the exhaustive list. Obviously, the total list is over 150.
With the urban parts as well.
Yes, yeah. That's just an example for members to try to gauge what type of park falls within which category.
I just wondered whether the full list might be of use to members, because we know our local patches. We might know, especially the small amenity green space.
Yeah.
We might know a space.
The purpose of tonight, Council, was to agree the methodology for the toolkit. We didn't want to sort of confuse members with regards to drawing that list up before we've got agreement that this is how we want to develop the social value toolkit. Once we've got that agreement, we'll then publish the list of all the parks and open spaces by their social value score.
Sorry, I was just going to ask a couple of questions. So you're saying, therefore, I was going to ask the question, which is how many sites are on the district urban park and gardens list, how many are on the neighbourhood, whatever. So you're saying you haven't actually done that list?
We've got the list of all of the parks and open spaces. It was the list that I brought to over Scrutiny back in November 21.
Yeah.
Over 154 different sites. Yeah. They're all obviously categorised in either a district park, neighbourhood park, or an area of local open space. Yeah. What we haven't done at this point is put the social value score against those until we've got agreed by members that is how we want to calculate the social value score.
I understand the social value, but aren't we going to break them up are we doing it purely on social value, or are we doing it based on the three categories?
Yeah, so we're doing the social value score, then by the hierarchy of how they appear in the local plan. So it'll be the highest social value score for the district parks first. And when all of the district parks have been protected by the dedication, we'll then start working through the highest social value score for the neighbourhood park until all the neighbourhood parks are then protected by the dedication. And then we'll work on the highest social value score for the local open space and work through that list until all of the council's parks and open spaces are covered by the dedication.
The district and urban parks will be dealt with first?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Okay. Could I just ask, is Wandon Park included on the list?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It is, okay. And once the process is agreed, could you just remind the committee of what was the cost of putting one park on the list?
I haven't got the information directly in front of me, but my recollection was around £2,000. Was it £5,000? Okay. Yeah. So I think we was looking at, I think the recommendation was that we'd done at least one per year until every park and open space was covered by a dedication.
So we were only going to spend £5,000 a year on this? Because if we've got 167 sites, God help.
So we'd like to see it.
Yeah.
So we're going to do this over 167 years?
That was the recommendation to executive, was that we that we would start a process of gradually, over as many years as necessary, progressing deed dedication arrangements with Fielding Trust with an ultimate aim of protecting all of Luton's parks and green spaces from development.
Exactly. I had underlined in this thing over as many years as necessary. Well, I looked at that and I thought that was a bad one. That is just ridiculous for us to recommend that. And we need to put some form of amendment into this where we say, well, you know, we say we expect all of the A category ones to be done within a certain timescale, all the B. Now, what I would suggest is that we agree to the process and then we ask that report to come back to us for us to put a further recommendation, because it's just ridiculous. If we just send this off with 167 years, one a year, I mean, what the hell are we sitting here for? We're all going to be dead way before any of that. I mean, I just think that it's just too wishy-washy where we're working at. And you could do all this. What's the point of you doing all this work, you know, doing this now? I'm sure in 150 years' time, nobody even remember what it is. It'll probably be, you know, God knows where we'll be then. I just think we need to agree this process and then put some amendment that says this then comes back to us for a further recommendation on timescales for this to be achieved. I just think it's too loose over as many years as necessary. So whether we need, I don't know whether we need a new amendment or whether we need to amend the original recommendation. I'd seek some advice that we can, if we approve this as a process, we then put in further advice on timescales for it to be achieved.
Could I just
I'm not talking about all done in a year, but I'm just talking about not 167 years.
So the recommendation that went to executive is what prompted us to develop the social value tool. There was quite a long discussion about budget and whether any budget was allocated to this. And there was a discussion about when budget became available through whatever means that we could progress this more quickly if budget was available. I think the decision from executive was to move forward in the first year to start this process. But we always were aware that should more budget become available or budget be allocated to it, then the process wouldn't necessarily just be one per year. In terms of this report, it's been brought to OSB to the board to note how the social value tool has been developed.
I understand that. My feeling is, though, we've left it too loose. And we've got to have, yes, we agree with this process, but we would hope that by a certain timescale, 10 were done, 20 were done, but just leaving it 167 years whenever, talk about kicking something into the long grass, you'd all this process. We got the process, but no real direction or action. I mean, that is, nobody would ever set an objective that said over as many years as necessary. If I saw a manager and one of my managers put that as an objective, well, they just don't bother, tear it up, throw it out the window. I just think we've got to include that within our process timescale.
Councillor Chapman, I don't think that Open Scrutiny have the powers to change a executive recommendation that's already been agreed by the executive. But what you can do is you can put forward a reference to the executive stating out what you've just said for them to reconsider.
Yeah, what we need. So, for example, or it will say something like, we approve the methodology for the identification and we recommend to executive that once this process has been completed, that all of the district and urban parks, for example, are completed within a 5-year period. We're talking here, remember what we're talking about here, there are probably 10 of them. Yeah, there are probably 10 of them, of the large ones, Wardown, Stockwood, those ones, the bigger ones. We're talking about 5 years to spend £50,000 to get these protected forever. It just seems to me that whether we need to put that timescale in it now or whether when it comes back to us, I need advice on that. I just feel leaving it 167 years to do whatever you want is ridiculous. So I thank you for that advice, and I don't know if I need to put something together or you can put something together that says that.
Yeah, I would suggest a simple way through this is that we do accept the recommendation, that we agree with the methodology to be used, and that we ask the executive to come forward with a projected timetable by which it could be achieved.
Yes, Councillor Wynne.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I do not agree with Councillor Franks on this occasion. I wonder how the hell we got here. What OSB wanted was to have all of Luton's green spaces protected. Now, some of them are already protected. Some of the larger ones have already got protections in force. Now, this is only being discussed now and was only put forward with a recommendation to executive from OSB the last time, because we're trying to protect our green spaces from Luton Borough Council. The reason that we're having to protect them is Luton Borough Council. Luton Borough Council has chosen to ignore the protection which has been put in its own local plan. If I give you two recent examples, one is Wandon Park and the other is Wigmore Park. Now, we're being offered this social value tool. Perhaps I can just explain a little bit of where my thought process is coming from. I was originally trained as a mathematician before I moved on to engineering. One of the early pioneers of mathematics was a person called Euclid. Euclid wrote a book called Elements, and in Elements he tried to differentiate between a theorem and an axiom. The axiom that we have here, which does not need to be proved, is that we need to protect our green spaces, and the green spaces are equally valuable to all members of our community, not just to selected members of the community. I have to say that the process that's being proposed here may or may not have merit, because I haven't seen the detail of how we're getting this evaluation done, and we don't have the detail here. But to be honest, what OSB asked for was for all the parks to be protected. I don't think we need a complex analysis tool to do that. I really don't. So I'm afraid that no, I don't agree with what Councillor Franks has said. I do not believe that we need a complex analysis process to do it. I think, quite frankly, we could evaluate most of the green spaces we need to protect and put them into a ranked order in a relatively simple, straightforward way.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. More or less the members have said, I generally think we need a timely, some kind of timely wording to reflect the members' views on this.
Hold on. Thank you. Councillor Say, you've been patient.
This was one of the recommendations, I think, from this review and scrutiny board to look at the parks. There was a discussion in the executive, and the executive then asked to have a look and then do the consultation. So if I remind members, is that this is something is to agree the process, and within the resources that the council has got, I could agree probably with the projected timescale. What I would not agree that we have to do this it has to be a social value, and it has to be done from the district park into neighbourhood park and then into open spaces. And Liverpool has done that. It has taken them a number of years and they're still doing it. So it is not a very quick process because we haven't got any spare cash sitting anywhere in the council that we can do that. There are statutory as well as more services, but every member in here and all 48 are committed to protecting the open spaces, and it is to value to every equal one of us, every citizen of Luton, not only our district parks but also our open spaces. And some areas of the town, you know, I happen to live, to get an open green space is a luxury. And I'm talking about Dallow and Biscuit, a densely populated area. So for me, it is very important personally to protect every green space where we can. And I would agree with that, but I certainly would ask my colleague to reject that we put a timescale. We ask the executive to look at a projected, because I think, you know, 167 years is not going to be even probably, you know, my children or probably close to my grandchildren's. So I think, you know, we need to protect these, but in terms of the resources and in terms of what we agreed. And I don't think we had a major, this is something that you did ask for, and they have looked at it, and that's what they're asking you now. So I ask colleagues to, you know, not to agree to a projected time, but certainly not, also, sorry, but suggesting that we do that immediately is not going to be. I ask them to vote against it.
So Jabina,
Thanks very much, Chair. I agree with what my colleague has said, and I was just about to say something similar, so I'm not going to repeat that. But yeah, as a councillor, I mean, I think every councillor here is all for protecting our parks and our green open spaces, and I've always done that, and I'm sure all my colleagues have done that as well. So yeah, but I completely agree with what Councillor Senna said there.
Excuse me, Chair, just to come back. I'm not saying we shouldn't protect all the parks. I'm saying this is an overcomplicated way of trying to get to the point that we all want to get to.
But if I could, sorry, Chair, if I could just respond to that, for the reasons as set out by Councillor Hussain, you can't actually put, you know, like an immediate timescale to that, because it's a complex process for starters, and also there are budgetary constraints and also resource constraints and achievables as well. So I think I probably would like to hear from the officer as to what, you know, the social value parameters and indicators are, because that's what, you know, we've requested it, and I'd like to see the details.
Okay, I'll just go through the indicators that were used for this. There was 10 indicators that were all equally weighted. Indices of, and each lower super output area is a small area. Each was given a score. There's over about 130 of these Luton split up into these areas, and each area was given a specific score. And where the green space or park was in that area, then that score is attributed to them. So the indicators that were used are the index of multiple deprivation, and the more deprived an area, the higher the score. The population density, the more densely populated an area, the higher the score. Distance from green space, the further from a green space, the higher the score. So the unemployment rate, the higher the unemployment rate, the higher the score. And also the fifth one was the prevalence of obesity in school children. With the greater incidence of obesity, there was a higher score in that particular area. And the final five indicators were more environmental considerations rather than socio-economic and deprivation ones. The first one was regarding air quality, and that with the data from the Department for Environment, if there was a higher air quality,
then it was deemed in this particular indicator that the green space was having a positive impact. So the higher the air quality, the higher the score. There was another blue space. It was developed by Consumer Data Research Centre, combines indicators such as environment, health service, physical environment and health quality. AHH's green space measures the accessibility of green space. With the more accessible score, the higher this particular one indicator was given. By a diversity measure, this one took the sites of specific scientific interest, with having the highest score, country wildlife sites, the next highest, and the third highest for the district wildlife sites. And the final one was the higher the score in the community assets, the higher the score for that particular area. All these indicators were given an equal weight and combined into one index to give a score for each statistical area in Luton. And then whatever falls into that area will, the higher the score, the higher the area, and the higher the social value of the green space will deem to be.
But if we can quickly finish this off before I hand over to Councillor Malik, it would be helpful. So, Councillor Franks.
Okay, I've only 2 points to make. One is we did ask for parks and open spaces to be identified, the social value of them. That was what we asked for. This is a methodology for achieving that. It's about as good as we're likely to get, in my opinion. So I formally propose that we agree with the methodology and commend it to the executive and ask them to produce a provisional timescale for achievement.
Consider a timescale to be over as many years as necessary. That is not a timescale.
We provisional timescale and ask the executive to come back. Be a consultation process as well.
Okay, that we agree with the proposed methodology. We commend it to the executive and ask them to produce a provisional timescale for achievement.
Thank you. So moving on to next item is a draft overview scrutiny board work program for 15th of August. Any recommendations, any comments?
Libraries are going out to consultation and a report is going to the exec in October. I think we should have that on. We should be looking at that because I think it's important. I thought it was some of that. I couldn't see it. That was why I looked at it quickly, and that's when I sort of did, oops. Because it would have to come to September. Oh, no. No, it's not.
Councillor Franks?
October.
Just a question, really, which I guess Angela's most likely to be able to answer. The Stockwood Park master plan, the brief that's to be given to the consultants, has been on our forward plan for quite some time, and it keeps getting shifted because the officers have clearly made it clear that they're needing to do more work on it. That's fine. That's not a problem with that. I just want to know whether we've got any clue as to how likely it is that it will actually be coming to the 19th of September meeting, or whether it's likely to be delayed again.
Answer.
No, thank you.
Get that bit.
Okay, well, we'll wait and see. As long as it's still on the future programme. I mean, in the end, we want a fully considered proposal. So if it takes more time, it takes more time. We'll wait for it.
I don't know, I'm afraid, but I can get an answer sent through the chair to the board members.
Anything else? Yeah, Sarah?
Could I just point out a typo on page 172 on the work programme for the November meeting? There is a litter enforcement report, and the note says that the officers had requested that be moved from the 20th of July meeting. It was actually scheduled for the 24th of October meeting. It's quite a new item, and we asked it to be moved to the November meeting because officers weren't available for the October. So we haven't moved it a considerable way. We've just moved it from 1 month to the next.
Could you just repeat what?
The litter enforcement report.
Where was it?
In the November meeting. It states that officer requested it to be moved from the 20th of July, but it actually was originally timetabled for the October OSB meeting and moved to the November meeting because of officer availability.
Anything else? No, thanks. Okay, so Local Government Act 1972